Good evening, and welcome to the Unexplained. Imagine you had a secret that could change your entire life if exposed. Tonight, we explore a true story of a small town decimated by exposed truths, lies, and scandal, ending in trials and even death. This is the story of the Circleville writer. Circleville, 1976. School bus driver Mary Gillespie headed out to the letterbox, an ordinary morning routine, when she stumbled upon a curious letter. And within moments of opening the letter, her life changed forever.
Stay away from Massey. Don't lie when questioned about knowing him. I know where you live. I've been observing your house, and I know you have children. This is no joke. Please take it seriously. Everyone concerned has been notified, and everything will be over soon.
Gordon Massey was the superintendent for Westfall School. Since Mary worked as a bus driver for that school, she knew who he was. The writer claimed that they knew the two were a lot closer than just co-workers, and accused them of having an affair. But how could the writer possibly know? Mary decided to hide the letter from her husband Ron, which looks pretty suspect, even though she confessed that there was nothing going on at this point. She received another letter, and once again decided to keep it to herself, a mistake she would live to regret. Ron received his own letter from the writer. Not only did it expose the affair to him, but it also threatened his life if he didn't tell the Westfall School Board of the affair. Ron confronted Mary about the letter. She insisted that she wasn't having an affair with Gordon Massey. They decided to keep the letters to themselves and hoped that the situation would just go away. 2 weeks later, thinking that it might have been over, they received another threatening letter.
Gillespie, you have had 2 weeks and done nothing. Admit the truth and inform the school board. If not, I will broadcast it on CBS, posters, signs, and billboards until the truth comes out.
At this point, the couple became distressed. No matter the truth of the affair, their dirty laundry was about to be spread all over town. Who was sending these letters? Who could want to embarrass them this badly? They confided in 3 people: Ron's sister Karen, and her husband Paul Freshaw, and Paul's sister. The group discussed likely suspects and fell upon David Longbury. David, another school driver and co-worker, made an advance at Mary a while back and became angry with her when she pushed him away. Could he be the person writing these letters? They believed if David Longbury was the writer, he could have been jealous of the affair and decided to try and ruin Mary's relationship with Ron as some form of petty retribution. Paul, Ron's sister's husband, decided to write a threatening letter to David, insisting that he should stop stalking Mary. For a while, there was silence. Weeks passed with no incident. The group believed they scared off David from writing, but the writer wasn't done quite yet. Signs began appearing around town, even claiming that Massey had been assaulting Mary and Ron's 12-year-old daughter. It quickly became routine for Ron to wake up early and drive around town to take down the signs to protect his young daughter. And for Ron, his patience was thinning. August 19th, 1977. Ron received a phone call. The caller described the truck that Ron drove and where he lived. The caller was the Circleville writer, and Ron recognized their voice. He grabbed his gun, kissed his daughter goodbye, and drove off into the night. He drove faster and faster as he headed to the suspect's house. Sadly, he never made it. Only minutes after he left, he had crashed into a tree. He was pronounced dead on arrival. The sheriff, Dwight Radcliffe, noticed that his gun had fired a single shot before the accident, but there was no evidence of anyone being shot on the scene. At first, the sheriff believed foul play was at work. Foul play was thrown out when blood tests revealed that Ron's blood alcohol content was twice over the limit. The sheriff concluded that it was a drink driving accident. Oddly enough, Ron wasn't much of a drinker. His family and friends corroborated that, and many people became upset by this ruling, saying it didn't sound like Ron, including the Circleville writer. Residents of Circleville began receiving letters stating that the sheriff was covering up the truth of the accident. They also claimed that the sheriff mishandled evidence in other cases. Mary decided to come clean about her relationship with Gordon Massey. She admitted that she was having an affair, but it didn't start until after she received the letters. She hoped this admittance to the affair would stop the harassment, but it was far from being all over. On February 7th, 1983, Mary was driving her bus route when she noticed signs against the road. The constant exposure to these signs finally took its toll. She pulled over and went to take down the sign. Unfortunately for her, it was no ordinary sign. Hidden within a box was a small pistol rigged to fire. Thankfully, the gun never went off. If she had pulled the sign down a different way, this could have been the end of the road for Mary. The police were called and they examined the weapon. There was a crude attempt to remove the serial number, and the gun was quickly traced back to Paul Freshaw, the now ex-husband of Ron's sister, Karen. Paul and Karen separated when Paul discovered that Karen was having an affair. Not only did he gain full custody of the children, he also got the house. Karen had been living in a trailer in Mary's backyard ever since. Karen had confessed to Mary that she believed that Paul could have been behind the letters. The sheriff brought in Paul for questioning. He asked him to try and replicate the handwriting, and then asked him where he kept his gun. The sheriff took him back to his house, where the gun was missing. He claimed it had been stolen twice before, but the sheriff didn't buy it and placed him under arrest for the attempted murder of Mary Gillespie. October 24th, 1983. Paul Freshaw went to trial for the attempted murder of Mary Gillespie. 39 of the letters were allowed into evidence, even though he wasn't being charged for writing them. The handwriting on the letters were verified to be a match by a handwriting expert. On the stand, Mary discussed her belief of Paul writing the letters due to her conversations with Karen about it. Paul claimed to have a solid alibi for his whereabouts on that day, but chose not to take the stand. This turned out to be a big mistake due to his boss taking the stand and saying that he did not turn up for work that day. He was eventually found guilty and sentenced to 7 to 25 years in prison. A sigh of relief came to the town, knowing that they could finally live in peace once again. Except there was one problem. The letters didn't stop. In fact, they got stranger. The writer threatened to dig up the grave of a baby and send the bones to the police if they didn't investigate into Roger Klein, the prosecutor of the case. The writer claimed that Klein murdered a pregnant schoolteacher. Martin Yant, a journalist and author, said,
"They were being received all over a large area of central Ohio, so a lot of people couldn't understand how Paul Freshour could be mailing all these letters from prison."
The prison wardens checked Paul's outgoing and incoming mail and even put him in solitary confinement, but the letters didn't stop. He even received a letter himself.
Freshour, now when are you going to believe you aren't going to get out of there? I told you 2 years ago, when we set them up, they stay set up. Don't you listen at all? No one wants you out. No one. The joke is on you. Tell no one of this letter. I saw the paper. Great news. Great. The sheriff loved it. Do you believe it now? Do you?
Once he reached 7 years in prison, he became eligible for parole. Yet he was denied parole because of the letters, even though they found it impossible for him to be sending them in the first place. A witness, a co-worker of Mary's, confessed that they saw a sandy-haired man standing beside a yellow El Camino in the same location to where the booby trap sign was on that fateful day. The sheriff decided not to explore that possibility, but if he did, he would have found that the brother of the unidentified suspect that they interrogated for Ron's death owned a yellow El Camino. May 1994. Paul was finally given parole and pled his innocence until his death in 2012. The letters also stopped in 1994. As of this day, the person behind these letters is unknown. So let's take a look at the most popular theory and see who could possibly be the Circleville writer. Today, we'll be combining journalist Martin Yant's findings with my own personal theories. So, who was the writer? Martin Yant believed that David Longbury, the infatuated co-worker, was the writer of the initial letters and the person to call Ron on his final night. His car crash was simply an accident, and he could have fired his gun out the window whilst driving. I think this one makes sense, but the gun firing is quite odd to me. If the gun didn't go off, I would feel comfortable with this explanation. But the man was known to not be a drinker and not seen to be a violent individual. But I guess if someone has been terrorizing you for so long, who knows what people are truly capable of? Martin deduced that there wasn't just one writer, but a second person who continued the legacy of the Circleville writer. Martin suggests that Karen began putting up the signs around Circleville and setting up the booby trap to frame Paul, citing the fact that Paul not only got full custody of the children, but also got the house as well. I think if you were trying to get away with murder, you'd do a better job at removing the serial number from the weapon, so it makes sense that someone framed him. Martin had a few choice words about Karen.
A very angry, manipulative woman who was still planning negative stories about Paul in the early 1990s.
But what about that witness with the yellow El Camino? It has been suggested that the sandy-haired man could match the description of Karen's new boyfriend at the time, who happened to have a relative who owned a yellow El Camino. Karen asked Paul's sister if she could use Paul's typewriter, even though they had split up at the time. Karen claimed she wanted to write a book. Even though Paul's sister found it odd, she let her use it. Many of the letters used a typewriter. But asking to borrow a typewriter isn't exactly cold hard evidence. But even if this means that two people were behind the letters, how does that explain the thousands of letters received by other residents of the town? Was it to throw them off the scent? Either way, Martin truly believed that Paul wasn't involved with sending the letters, but can't say for certain. Personally, I'm unsure of his involvement. I don't really understand his motive if he was involved. Lies, scandal, and death. Who was the Circleville writer? Who had that much hatred and bitterness within them to destroy the lives of their neighbours? Or was the true villain the botched investigation? A sheriff who focused their efforts on an innocent man and ignoring other witness accounts? We may never know the truth, therefore it remains a mystery of the unexplained. Personally, no matter how you look at it, the time span between the original letter and the final letter is long. Is it possible that this started off with one or two writers and Circleville eventually became a town of copycats? Where if anyone had an issue, they'd expose it under the guise of the Circleville writer? Or was it the game of one sick individual who got away with terrorizing a town for almost a decade? What do you think? Although the letters officially stopped in 1994, there are rumours that they still continue. So when you check your letterbox or answer the phone from an unknown caller, beware. Your secret might be exposed next. Until next time, friends, good night.